All right. I'm going to call this meeting of the Infrastructure Resiliency Advisory Task Force to order. A few minutes late. Thank you all for everybody hanging on online. First order of business is the adoption of the previous minutes. Am I able to get a motion to adopt the minutes? Thank you. Any discussion to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion prevails. Okay, so we have two things on the agenda for today. So we're getting down to the point where we start to need to make recommendations for a report that we'll put together for the legislature. And so two of the agenda items that we have for today are the purpose of the board and then discussion about the board structure. And so, and we're just calling it a board for now. I had a meeting with research about what the best way to go would be, a board, a council, or an office, and really how the recommendations that we make are kind of determine what it's going to look like. And so as we go through and answer these questions, some of that stuff will start to present themselves for the legislation. So with that being said, the discussion of the purpose. And so I know we had sent out some of the draft mission statements, and so just would like to hear some feedback if folks got a chance to look at that, if there's anything that pops out that doesn't work or that should be added. So the on the general template for legislation, the purpose, point A, we had kind of drafted the Minnesota Infrastructure Board is created to define a vision for Minnesota's infrastructure that ensures continued statewide public and environmental health, pristine natural resources, economic prosperity, high quality of life. The board will develop a comprehensive approach to enhance infrastructure developed through consultation with stakeholders and users of our state, local, and private infrastructure system. Feedback, please, Russ.
Yeah, Chair Cagle, I'll suggest maybe a possible addition. On the second line, as it reads, Minnesota's infrastructure that ensures continued, and then insert and sustainable statewide public environmental health, so on. So just the addition of and sustainable.
Okay, so it would add ensures continued and sustainable statewide public and environment. So it would be for all of those statements.
Correct.
Okay.
That'd be my intention. Yeah.
Any other discussion to this? I mean, this is kind of a big thing that's going to encompass the entire council. So, Greg?
Did we want to incorporate some resiliency measures in the purpose? I mean, I think that's kind of a big.
I know we had some questions or some discussions about this.
So I'd love to know, like, what does resiliency and sustainability mean to you? Like, let's talk about that. Because again, when you're sitting, like when everybody's sitting at the table, it can mean different things for different people. So I'd love to know, like, you know, first we could go, if you don't mind me asking Russ, what does sustainable mean to you? And then when you're hearing that word and thinking about it, what does that mean? And then I'd love to get your feedback too on resiliency.
Great question. I agree. There's lots of different definitions. For me, if we're going to continue, and I believe we're doing a good job as a state of, you know, with our public and environmental health and the natural resources and economic prosperity, but I want to make sure that, like with the city of Eagan, I'll go back to my example. We're recognizing that in order to continue to provide a high quality of life for the residents of Eagan, that we may not be able to continue at our current level of funding, or of I guess just the infrastructure that we have. We have to make sure that it's sustainable. And so my definition of sustainable is something that's going to enable folks to thrive, enables folks to be successful, but be realistic, you know, so not to have you know, Lyle pointed out a lot of different needs that we've had a couple meetings ago. And an example that I use, and I don't know that I shared this here, but I don't know that we're going to continue to be able to continue to have every community in Minnesota to do things the way they're currently doing or the way they've done things in the past. I don't think we can afford to do that realistically. And so I want to make sure that we can continue to provide all of us with what we need to be successful, to thrive, but it's going to have to be in a sustainable, it's going to have to be with sustainable means. So it's going to have to be cost affordable, you know. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, that helps. That does help me understand where you're coming from.
I went roundabout a little bit maybe, but bottom line, to be able to afford what we want to do to help people be successful.
And so, okay, so then I'll dig in a little bit deeper. How do you think that affordability will happen? Like if the comprehensive plan is there, if the board goes, here's the 30 to 50 year trajectory on infrastructure for the state of Minnesota, and we know there's things that need to happen in order to kind of fall under that umbrella of reliable, sustainable, affordable infrastructure. How does that happen if the means aren't there? Like, let's say your tax base is different 25 years from now. It could either go and really support it, or it could go the other way. Like, I mean, just realistically.
Yeah.
And so I get cautious sometimes with certain words and just ways that we are talking about things, is I don't want it to be heaped on then all the taxpayers of Minnesota, or, you know, to do things if it's not going to be a good return on the investment.
So an example I'll give you, and this is something we did in EGAN, but we did a 50-year projection on what we would need in order to maintain what we currently have for infrastructure, both streets and utilities. And, you know, with anticipated growth a little bit, not much, you know, EGAN's pretty well developed, but, and we put that out there for 50 years and estimated, and we can do that. We can estimate what the cost would be to replace those pipes and upgrade those roads or reconstruct the roads. So we did a cost estimate for that. And then we looked at what our funding sources were. And then we adjusted, we had to adjust our funding sources. We could not continue to go the way we were currently going with our utility rates and with our taxes and such. So we presented that to the council, we presented them a plan to fund those improvements, and they selected one of the funding options, but they could have chosen not to do all the infrastructure upgrades that we're planning to do. But I guess that's a scenario. We can do cost estimates on whatever we want to do, you know, whatever's proposed, and then we can provide different funding scenarios. But you're absolutely right. We're going to have to keep a constant finger on the pulse, you know, 25 years from now, because like you said, you know, taxes may change, utility rates may change. And so that's going to have an impact, and people need to understand that. I think that's a part of our effort too, is helping to educate folks, to help them see the big picture on, you know, if they're going to make a change in their utility rates or their taxes or whatnot here, that's going to have a long-term impact. And they need to understand that. I mean, and maybe that's okay. I mean, maybe we can reel back some of the things that we're currently proposing. And I think realistically, we're going to have to do that. I mean, I'll give a really scary scenario of maybe there's a community that exists today that it's not going to be able to exist anymore within the confines of its geographic location, because it doesn't have the means in which to afford to replace the sewer system, you know, and the water treatment plant and such. So they're going to maybe have to combine with some neighboring communities.
It's really real. I mean,
it's real.
It's really happening.
It's really real.
Because you can't squeeze. Is it water out of a turnip or something? I don't know.
Blood, yeah.
What is it? Blood. That's. I was like, I thought it was blood, but I don't know. But you know, you can't. And again, so that's where I want to be like, just realistic about when you throw out a mission statement, to have just some real like understanding and meaning. So I appreciate that.
That's the motivation for my addition of and sustainable, because of what I described.
Okay.
Well, and I was thinking about this too, and I don't know if
Yep.
we want to go to the question about resiliency, but so I was kind of looking to see if we had a state defined definition of sustainability, and so we don't. So that might be an opportunity for us to define it, if that's something that we want to do. But I was also looking at the Office of Enterprise Sustainability here at the state of Minnesota, and it says the state of Minnesota as an enterprise defines sustainability as meeting the economic, social, and environmental needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. I know, right?
Hmm. So, okay, so with infrastructure though, you are kind of putting that on the future generations, you know? So that's interesting concept there.
And then how do we deal with the maintenance as well? But I mean, I don't know if these are things that we need to dive in with a mission statement, or if these are kind of more of our strategic initiatives or goals, I guess, I don't know. John?
It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
These priorities, these approaches change over time. One word that stuck out to me, and when we dive into a mission statement, every word has merit. Enhance is one. When I get into resiliency and I start thinking that way, preserving is another, talking about available funding and resources. Knowing the difference between the two, I don't believe they're the same. Sometimes you may be able to enhance infrastructure when you're making improvements, but sometimes because of where you're at in the situation, your community, your stakeholders are in, preservation is the only approach that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's another key word potentially that you could incorporate in there. Enhance and/or preserve. I don't know if that's an approach, but from a resiliency standpoint, sometimes we might not have a choice. We have to go one way or the other. Do nothing. I hate to think that way, but certainly it's merit.
Yeah. Agree?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. To put a little different spin on this is in the broadband world, when we build and you use state funds or federal funds, we're building those infrastructures scalable, like at the seam, because we know we need to have it built for growth. We know that the usage is only going to go up from where we currently are. And our goal is to have one good provider, and then from there, competition can be naturally built. So I'm here to help represent that. So I just wanted to also just represent that, in public investment, in that we know the dollars have to go really far. We're fortunate, at least in broadband, to be able to see that and build that infrastructure to the future the first time as best we can.
Part of it too then should be retiring old infrastructure, like copper landlines. I know that's a big deal for a lot of, so that's something we should think about too. Tom, and then I know, and then Jean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just in this discussion, and we got this information, we talked a little bit about it last time. In this mission statement, it all sounds good. And for me, just the last half is what was more pertinent. If you look at the minimums that are put into the enabling statute or what's on the website, they list 5 things you have to do at a minimum. Some of this stuff, I think we're going to try to get into outside the lanes of what maybe this was created for up front. And maybe if we stay within those minimums and then we can build it out from there, I think we may be, just my take, it talks about the federal dollars, the state dollars, the local dollars. I think some of this, get a basic mission statement. We can talk about what we want that incorporates the missions. Even the opening line, infrastructure resilience advisory task force is established to evaluate issues related to coordination, sustainability, resiliency, and federal funding on state, local, and private infrastructure in the state. I mean, that we're not tying the hands of the future. If we can build something out from what was put in this original 5 points in that, and I know it says a minimum, so you can go bigger, but if we start thinking of how we're going to do all this at once, I don't know if we'll get to the base of what this group was put together, because this is all, like when we applied for this is all I had to go off of. Oh, this sounds like it's gonna be really good. Not that a bigger version of this wouldn't be, but if we can find out what our base mission is and build from there, I think that might go a long way. I just, personally, I feel like if we get too big, we're just gonna be jumping out of our lane, and I don't know if, I wasn't one of the 2 authors, they're sitting here, I don't know what the intent was, but this is kind of what was put in front of me when I was asked if I wanted to apply for this, so. And I think it really goes in there, not that the other stuff is bad, I just think if we get our mission statement to the core of what this was put together for, and then build it out from there.
Jean?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a really good point, and I'm guessing that, you know, if the board is created, they might want to tweak their own mission statement too. So maybe purpose might be well adjusted, or we might be well set if we just stick with the purpose that's in legislation. But in that same vein, or maybe in a different vein, I was thinking about the trade-offs between, and to the point of sustainability a little bit, about adding in some language, you know, that we're ensuring statewide public environmental health, pristine natural resources, economic prosperity, and high quality of life. And then the trade-off of that is while optimizing return on investment and value of the infrastructure assets. So it's just another phrase that acknowledges that we're trying to do all of these things, obviously, but really we're looking for a good return on investment in our asset, our infrastructure assets.
I like that one.
One of the first meetings, I remember we were talking about really the coordination of different agencies too. And, you know, it's kind of addressed in the bottom, but it's more in consultation. So I'm wondering if, you know, we shouldn't have something more stronger that says coordination or collaboration or something.
Yeah,
Because that and too will go to what her point was, is the more cooperation and coordination we can have, the better value we get for our dollar too.
and I think I like Tom's idea of kind of just taking what we used for this task force and kind of establish to evaluate, the Minnesota Infrastructure Board is created to evaluate issues related to coordination, sustainability, resiliency, federal funding on state, local, and private infrastructure in the state. That's pretty broad, but yet getting to the point of what we're trying to do. And then Jean, what was the last part that you had put in?
So this is in that second no, it's in the first sentence, sorry. At the end of the kind of the list of, you know, what we're really trying to ensure in terms of public environmental health, et cetera,
Yeah,
while optimizing return on investment and value of infrastructure assets. But I'm happy to send this to you if it would be helpful.
while optimizing
ROI, return on investment,
and
and value of infrastructure assets.
anybody online have any comments?
Can-
Oh, go ahead, yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm struggling a little bit, just like as a private infrastructure owner. Or I was thinking about Russ' example, the city of Eagan. What's still not quite clear to me is how this board, how we would interface with this board, or how we would look, coordinate with the board or whatever. I mean, so using the Eagan example, you know, the city council is the governing entity, right? So they have their public works department go through a number of scenarios, and then that local unit of government makes that decision. Or in our case, we propose something and the Public Utilities Commission gives us a yay or a nay, and we go forward. Can you help me better understand a little bit, like, you know, as we work as a board, how do we interface as a private utility infrastructure owner?
Yeah, so I think part of that would be within the strategic initiatives. You know, if we're looking at doing some sort of GIS or what data, or like a dig once portal. But I think also a lot of those questions will be answered when we kind of dig into the discussion of the board structure, because I can really see entities like yours playing a role on the board structure and driving that coordination, federal funding, and kind of vision for the state through that board. That makes sense. Yeah, Lyle?
You know, there's a lot of good discussion here about sustainability and all the different areas, but I don't see a statement in here about finances. I know we're trying to be as cautious as we can with our resources, but moving into the future, which is something we're all gonna do, is it's gonna take resources, financial resources. You know, quite frankly, I've been estimating projects, public works projects for 50 years. And every year, you add another increment of percent of increase. We never go backwards, we're always going forward. And I'm sure Russ, in developing a program there over 50 years, that takes some big eyes to figure that out. But that's what we're up against. And so I would like to see something in here about financial resources.
And that's where I'm thinking with the, if we go back to Tom's suggestion and kind of just go back to that task force mission statement, that has, you know, related to coordination, sustainability, resiliency, and federal funding on state, local, private. And then adding the ROI piece. And then I also do think it is really important that we add preservation. Whoever brought that up, I thought that, you know, that's something that we've been directing MnDOT to do for a while now, is fix it first. And, you know, it's a lot easier to fix something that has been maintained well. You know, if you let your roof leak, you're gonna have to replace the shingle, or, you know, everything on the inside too. Or if you just replace that hole from the get-go, you'd be good. So I think adding preservation, I like that piece. Micah?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I find myself in a strange position suggesting we strike the word federal, but I'm going to do that because I think that at the current moment in time we're at, it makes a lot of sense that federal is front and center in the conversation because we want to maximize those resources to advance our goals. But I think that over time, you know, 10 years from now, somebody may look at this and say, well, wait, why are we looking at federal funds if they aren't as abundant as they are today?
Right.
So maybe just
And
striking
funding.
federal and just focusing on funding broadly so that we're able to have the flexibility to understand that there are different resources are going to be tapped to a greater extent at different times.
Yeah, I like that.
That's, okay, so that's really good. That's a nice way to say that. I mean, it, as administration will change over, I think we have to go back to what is the heart of this task force, just, you know, and I understand that we have to have, you know, things realistically, the dollars and how things add up. But if we look at this board, and this will come later on in our discussion, but the hope is to not have it be a regulatory board. We don't want to grow another thing, which would require folks that would be, you know, appointed to this position that then maybe would or wouldn't, depending on how that board is structured, tap into private sector more, or would they tap into, you know, it just, that can ever be changing. So if you look at just infrastructure and just, or, you know, a realistic but common sense approach to what is going to be needed, you know, the next 50 years. And if things are funneled through here and then resourced out to you to capture money here or there, or if it's privately funded, because they're going to make money, because they're going to invest in this area. Or I do think there needs to be flexibility, and I'd caution, you know, tying dollars to a mission statement, but I also know that there needs to be an understanding of what does this, you're asking, what is this board actually going to do? And so I do want to get back to Greg and ask, like, what does resiliency mean to you? Because that is a word I would just love to know. And I mean, maybe it's just digging too much into it, but I do feel like as this part is set up, it helps form, you know, some infrastructure for what this board is going to look like. So it doesn't just change depending upon who's in the majority, minority, who's at the federal. I mean, I would hope that Minnesota could look at what is Minnesota and how can we make it.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation.
Okay.
I might answer your, the latter question first, or kind of the
Okay.
comments first. I mean, it seems like this is more a facilitating board. I mean, because we're trying to cross jurisdictions, right? I didn't see this as regulatory.
Yeah.
I think it's really just to break down the silos so that we understand, is there some commonality of interests that we can kind of create a critical mass? But as far as resiliency is concerned, I mean, I can see resilience, and I think some of the comments about just sustainability. There is a fiscal sustainability that you were getting at, Vice Chair. I think that that's important here. We're not losing sight of. And just like that, and on the resiliency side, I think there's some economic resiliency in addition to just the infrastructure resilience. I mean, it's a balancing of these interests is how I'm kind of viewing this. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's kind of a, how do we best balance these types of competing interests among the massive demands that we have for infrastructure going forward.
And coordinate where we can. So what I have written, I've kind of just been jotting notes as we go. Minnesota, so, and this is one of the things I think too that we'll get at the regulatory versus facilitation type places. The Minnesota Infrastructure Board is established to evaluate issues related to coordination, sustainability, resiliency, and funding on state, local, and private local, and private infrastructure in the state. Do we need to put that anyway? While optimizing ROI and value infrastructure asset, is that what you said?
Value of infrastructure.
Value of infrastructure assets. And then I also kind of stuck, and preserving assets at the end. I think, you know, wordsmithing this a bit. But does that encapsulate kind of the discussion that we have had? And if we take these ideas and wordsmith it, make it pretty, does that, do you guys all feel like that best encapsulates what we're trying to establish with this board? Again, the Minnesota Infrastructure Board is established to evaluate issues related to coordination, sustainability, resiliency, and funding on state, local, and private infrastructure in the state, while optimizing return on investment and value of infrastructure assets, while focusing on preservation or something along those lines? I don't know, that one.
Might have to add another sentence in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I look at it really
Yep,
quick?
yep.
The top
It's the
part.
second one here.
You can just make
Yeah.
a suggestion as going back to the actual minimum purposes of the task force and doing a little comparison to see if there's some.
I actually just did that.
It felt like you were summarizing there.
Yeah, so, and then I have the, my wonderful CA can read my thoughts before I think them, and sent me the minimum task for, at a minimum, the task force must, one, develop objectives and strategies to provide for the effective and efficient management of state, local, and private infrastructure. And then under that, enhance sustainability and resiliency of infrastructure throughout the state, respond and mitigate the effects of the adverse weather events across the state, including natural disasters, droughts, and floods, provide equitable treatment in areas of persistent poverty and historically disadvantaged communities, identify approaches to enhance infrastructure coordination across jurisdictions, agencies, state and local governments, public, private, including planning, design, engineering, construction, maintenance, and operations, identify methods to maximize federal formula and discretionary funds, evaluate options for organizational design of state agencies to meet the purpose, establishment of board or agency models in other states, and develop findings and recommendations. So does that I mean,
Okay, so what was all of that?
that,
I'm like, I need to be seeing things like,
that's the, I know, I'm sorry.
I know.
That
It is on the website if anybody wants to reference it
Okay.
right
Yeah,
now.
it's just the
You're
statutes.
referencing the
It's
statute?
that we.
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I was asking.
That
That's what I
created the
needed to know.
task force.
Okay, that's referencing the statute.
Yep.
Okay, that's what I got. Okay, good.
So I guess the question is that purpose statement encompassing what I asked myself to do?
Mm.
Not everybody jumping at one. Yeah, and we can always bring it back. I think, it's a good discussion to have so that we can kind of get feedback, but it sounds like first stab was not a good one. So I like the suggestions that we've had and that we kind of go back to the task force mission. And so what we'll do is we'll do some wordsmithing on that and then bring it back to the next meeting where we can have a better look at it and then vote to put it in our report. Next up is gonna be the fun one. So this is the one that I've really been going back and forth with about what is this board gonna look like and who's gonna be on it, who's gonna be the voting members. And so if you look at one of the handouts in your packets, there is on the back of the general template for legislation, using the legislation established by Michigan Infrastructure Council. So they have their, this is what they used for their board. And then this is the sheet that has their voting and non-voting members on it. So the question is, do we just copy them and go with the non-voting members that they have? Do you guys believe that those would be good agencies to have as the non-voting members? And then if you look at the voting members, they have in the members in bullet A under board structure, the first three bullet points, 1, 2, 3, that's the qualifications for the appointments. And so the question that I've been wrestling with is, do we make it prescriptive so that we're making sure that we get the folks that we want on the task force, or do we make it more broad like the Michigan Infrastructure Council has done so that we can kind of pick from a broader group of people?
Can people online see this stuff too?
Oh,
It's all posted on there.
yeah,
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
okay,
Madam Chair,
yes.
may I just ask in the non-voting members, which I think probably reflects the agencies that Michigan have, but our state agencies are a little different as
Right.
far as like deed having representation and not necessarily fitting in there. So
Sure.
I think just making sure that all of our agencies that would be involved are at least within the boundaries of something similar.
Right, yeah, like what's a public service commission? Don't know. Yeah, Russ?
Sure, can I go? Part of the non-voting members includes a representative of the Water Asset Management Council and the Transportation Asset Management Council. We don't necessarily have those things.
Right.
Here in Minnesota, I like those things, and I like the representation. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with the cross-section of the members. Now, I'll be fully transparent. There's a lot of civil engineers in the bunch, so, I'm okay with that. Large folks, so,
Well, and who are we missing? Like, I don't see Met Council on here, and I don't know if, because it is they do a lot of the wastewater, and so I think that's definitely somebody that we need to have on as a non-voting member.
So I thought we were not gonna go that route because of just the way, I just thought that wasn't an option.
Well, I guess that's a question
Okay.
too. Do we want to
Okay.
have voting and non-voting members, Tom?
Madam Chair, so just my take on this, and I think however you set this up, and if you go back and do it legislatively,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know why you'd have non-voting members if you're picking who's appointing and you're putting your own state agencies into the mix, I mean, what Michigan does, it talks about experts in these certain areas on assets and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think we hope that our experts are already in these agencies and they'd have representation equal to that. So I don't know why we wouldn't just have everyone be a voting member, because then you can limit it. If you want 25 members, if you want 9 members, ultimately the
Yeah.
legislature gets to decide what they want it to look like. I mean, we can make a recommendation, but to have someone going through that, especially from an agency, if we're considering them outside, whatever they end up doing, they're gonna have to implement or work with across the board either way. So I mean, that's just my personal take. I think it would be minus civil engineers. I think maybe we won't have any civil engineers on.
well,
No,
I guess,
joking aside, I think build a board that everyone has a say and people get the buy-in. So that
yeah.
means more civil engineers.
I guess my worry about that is like with a lot of these departments, they're all political appointees.
Mhm.
And so having it be kind of outside of the political world is really where, or at least the perception of being within the political world. And so one of the things that I see as a benefit of having the non-voting members is that they would be advising and letting the board know how it works within the framework of the state. And, if the appetite is there at the administrative level. But to me, that would be kind of, I don't know, I feel like there'd be a little bit of a crossover that would be a little uncomfortable, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. Anybody else have any? Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead. Russ.
Chicago, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I share similar concerns as Chicago. I saw all the, appointed folks as political appointees. Now, honestly, some of them are civil engineers and public works folks, so maybe Michigan's got it figured out, I don't know, but that's where I saw, I saw someone like me being able to be a non-voting member, whereas I don't see someone like me being able to be a appointed member, because I'm not a political person,
Yeah.
So I guess that was my concern. I mean, it can work, but I feel like the non-voting gives it a little bit of extra safety.
Right, and then I just kind of think like the climate council or the climate cabinet seems to be, that political driver where, and Tom, and then I'll go back to Jean.
Yep.
Go ahead.
On that, if you're just setting up, if you're there to advise, then you're just an advisory task force. But if you're talking about a board that can make decisions, I mean, you could have the exact same makeup as this whole group and have the same people appoint those people, whether it's someone from the counties, the Minnesota cities, agency, like the same folks in the room, and they're gonna put forth the experts in those areas. I think a gap you might find is if you're focused on just asset management experts from the public and private sectors. Like I said, your hope is you have those experts within your departments. Someone's gonna be responsible for that, overseeing that anyways. So why not give them a say at the table outside of just advisory? Because in my mind, then you're just making an advisory task force, which this kind of is right here. If you want something more formal,
Well, and I was, kind of envisioning some strategic initiatives that the board would take on. Jean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Chair Keiko, finish your thought.
No, that's all I was thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too, and I was reading through how Michigan's language was about how they appoint their voting members, which, those are all political appointees. I think as far as the public agency representation and non-voting members, we're already members of the executive branch, not necessarily political appointees. And I know some of the folks like the Michigan DOT person on the infrastructure council, I don't think is a political appointee. But just as a matter of fact, because we're already members of the executive branch, it probably wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for us in our roles to be voting necessarily, but we can still be at the table advising and providing information.
Yeah, and I think, I see that when at the ORAC committee, we have non-voting members from MDH and that are there to advise and let us know, like, is this idea gonna work or is it not, So So, yeah, I guess that's, and then somebody online had also suggested public utilities or public.
Facility authority.
Public facilities. But then we have the question of what's the size? And who are the, so let's go to voting members. Who do we want to make sure that we have on the council who would be voting members? And if you look here at the member, they just have, so the question is, are we gonna want to be prescriptive, or can we go and do we want to have it more of a broader, like, here are the people that we want to make sure are making up the board, but not very prescriptive type of stuff? Anybody? So for they have asset management experts from those fields. Finance and procurement experts from public or private sectors, and experts in regional asset management planning across jurisdictions. See, I need somebody to explain to me what all this means.
Right.
Russ?
It's a lot of, it's folks like that are a part of this group, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Process-wise, I don't know if there's, obviously there's, the way that Michigan does it is they have politicians appointing.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, I don't know, in some of the advisory councils and so forth that we've put together at the DOT, we've done a, kind of a broad post, if you want to be considered, submit your resume and.
Yeah, and we were talking about that too, when we had when we were discussing this, with the way that the way I think about it as a political appointee is like, you just tell the speaker, I'm interested in this, and then they, wait it. But I don't think that, if I went to him and said I was interested in this, I want to be the wastewater expert on this council, like, I'm not qualified. And so how are we going to make sure that the people that we're getting on this council are qualified, and that we're getting the people that we want to serve on it? And then I think, I'm curious about how when those applications are taken, how are they vetted, and how are they appointed then?
It depends a little bit on who's making the appointments, but typically, we'd look through the application, or somebody would look through the application, identify who has the qualifications to be on the committee or the council or the board. And then, it's certainly folks who are interested, but we always seem to get more applications than we actually are able to appoint, so.
So then it would just be like, what is gonna be the size? And then, what are the specific kind of buckets we want to serve on the board?
I just have a comment, Madam Chair. A lot of, the people in this room have state associations where they are the head of, or representative of the people that are the, for example, the municipal utilities. We have a state organization that basically works for us and knows all of the, municipal issues and things like that. And so, if you're looking for experts, they're the ones that are representing the people or the organizations within their group.
Is there anybody in this room that were, like, who do we not have in this room that should be here? I'm thinking Met Council. Do we have somebody from public facilities on this? We have people from water, okay. Are there any glaring people that we're missing, or is this something that we want to kind of like, this is a good group, we've got good representation here, maybe we add a few members? We have ag, right, on this, we have water, drinking and waste, right?
Yep.
We have counties, we have townships, cities,
Public Works.
public works, MnDOT.
Do we have preservation, like the SHPO and state archaeologists and those that are going to give us the green light to do all of the things that we need to do.
We also don't have
Tribes, we definitely. And then we'd probably want Dakota and Ojibwe.
Okay, so we're bouncing back and forth between, okay, I want to like wrap up one area if we could.
Sure, sorry.
I'm not trying to,
No,
I'm not
no.
trying to
No, this is helpful.
get after you, okay,
please.
or anybody.
You can.
Okay, cool. So I just want to come back to, we were on voting members. Okay, so we're just, where do we want to like hang out and finish that piece up? Or do we need to go to voting members and who does appointing authorities versus, are we gonna go through each column, like what's their job title and then who's gonna appoint them? Or is that, we can make that decision here as well? Because like when I look at this, depending upon who's in there, it's like 6-2 right now. Like currently, like this would not be a bipartisan board. As far as the governor gets 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, yeah, that-
You got your speaker.
I think
you
what
know.
we should focus on right now is who we want in the room.
Okay, because I'm just trying
Yeah.
to figure out, like, if who you want in the room, may look different depending upon who has the appointing authority,
Mhm.
because we would have to figure that piece out too.
Because, yeah, the appointing authority, I think, is gonna be kind of more the stickier area. But if we can determine the buckets of people that we want, then that appointing becomes a little less sticky, if you understand. Because if we're making sure that they have specific qualifications to be on this council or board,
Yeah.
then if they're appointed by the governor, or appointed by the speaker, it's gonna be a little less of a pool to pick from.
Well, I'll just say from my perspective, it's still sticky.
Yeah.
It's still sticky. And I mean, but I love that there's gonna be some ideas of like, not just like, hey, that sounds great to me,
Yeah.
that there would actually be some, request for, you're an expert in this or that or the other thing. But I do believe if we truly want to have, everyone represented, we would definitely need to talk about that piece too. So I didn't know if we're going to finish talking about voting members or if we're going to go back to non-voting members. I just need to throw that out there. I'm just going to be very
No, you're
transparent
good.
to
Yeah,
everybody
I
here.
like it.
So if anybody's got things, be bold and brave. Shoot us
Yeah, so I think, I want to go and look at the legislation on this and see if there's, see if there's anybody that we're missing as who we could consider a voting member. So what I would think is like, Russ, anybody from a state agency would not be, but like you and you would all probably be voting members, municipal,
Do we need to look at townships?
township, well, we got
Oh, you
Lyle.
do? Okay, I'm sorry.
Lyle's Township. And so I think kind of looking at the folks in this room and seeing who and where they would be. I'm trying to find this, I can't find
Question here.
yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of twofold. I think it touches on both voting and non-voting members going that direction. One watershed, one planning, and those efforts that are happening across the state. Bowser, I don't see on the original legislation, and likewise Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts from a voting standpoint. Those aren't necessarily appointed or from a governor or something. That's a representative from board similar to League of Minnesota Cities, Association of Counties, Townships. So there would potentially be one of each on those potentially from a watershed, water volume standpoint. That's a big change coming from a sustainability and resiliency standpoint. So those two, I think, would be good to be represented as well.
Bowser, and what was the other one? I'm sorry.
Like Association of Watershed Districts.
Okay. Would that be soil and water conservation, or is that
That's
something
a
different?
little different, but
Okay.
there's another one potentially from
Yeah.
the state board as far as a voting member could be included.
Because soil and water conservation, they have their own separate kind of board too, right?
Correct.
So, agriculture, okay, so we have Commissioner of Commerce, Health, Governor, Commissioner of Administration, Commissioner of Management and Budget. So Minnesota Township Associations, Association of Minnesota Counties, Municipal Utilities Association, Public Works, League of Cities, public utility that owns nuclear power, Association of General Contractors. Laura, do you think, would you want to be part of it? And then tribes. So those are the ones that we have on it right now. Yes, great.
It occurred to me, I mean, we don't have higher ed on there as well, even though they have, I mean, they have infrastructure spread all statewide.
I don't want to have higher ed on it. I mean, that's a
Oh,
good.
just who's in the room.
Yeah,
That's a good, that's a good. And
Asset
this is
preservation.
why, because I feel like, do some of these areas, and could be me being naive here, don't they already have their boards already set up? I mean, like, how would we tie in higher ed with infrastructure? I'm just,
Well, I'm just
Trying
thinking
to
from a
understand.
community standpoint, I mean, because
Okay.
they're in so many communities throughout the
Okay.
state. And they
okay,
interact, I mean, there's interaction between the
Okay.
campuses and the cities and municipalities.
yeah. Okay, this is
How-
good, this is helpful.
And asset preservation on that.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Across the state,
Okay.
facilities of all
Yep.
higher ed, and, you know, E through 12 is all asset preservation as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there an asset preservation organization?
Okay,
Madam Chair, there's, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, there's Institute of Asset Management, it's, but it's fairly new in Minnesota, it's English, originally it was started in England, it's bigger in New Zealand, Australia, but we do have a local chapter here.
But it's not, well, would that be public facilities then too? Would that, they kind of deal with asset preservation, right? Anybody?
Can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that would be a way to get them on without actually getting higher ed on.
Higher ed really isn't a member, I mean,
Yeah,
that deeply.
Okay.
but-
thanks for helping me clarify that. Did somebody else have their hand up, Lauren?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Thank
go
you,
ahead. I
Chair
appreciate
Cagle,
it.
Vice
I
Chair.
did, I saw it, so I was
No,
like,
go
sorry
ahead.
about that.
This is a conversation. an
Okay,
open
good,
one,
this is good.
please.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think we've identified most of the stakeholders here today, per your question.
Yeah,
I understand the desire to want to wrap up this part and then sort of delineate between voting and non-voting. I also think we have to determine the duties and the authority first to ensure the appropriateness, per Jean's point earlier, and also avoid any conflict of interest that may be perceived. I'm sure we all care about that. So I do think we have to establish those other concepts first, prior to determining exactly who is going to serve.
okay.
Because that will
I
dictate who should serve.
Right, Jessica?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Sorry, I might have missed this, and I just wanted to kind of second the comments that were just made about examining authorities and whatnot. I think I might have missed whether the Department of Commerce was included, but I think we would still have a role. But I could see us splitting out kind of the voting versus advisory functions and thinking about what agency respective authorities were and how we would participate in an ongoing kind of board or effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just looking at some of these. So the main duties then is something that we would have to come back to, I believe. I don't think that'd be something that we can dive in today. But I think it is, how do people, I would like to kind of judge the voting versus the non-voting, and how this group feels about having kind of more of the commissioners and state people be the non-voting members, and then have more of the private entities and public representation be the voting members. So that would be my preference. does anybody have any strong opposition to that? No? Do we all feel that that would, except, I mean, Tom, did you?
No, I mean, if we can go around the room.
Yeah.
I just think if you're gonna put it together, otherwise it's just advisory, I think everyone should be a voting member. However many groups you find that you feel should be represented, if you can find likeness between asset preservation groups and find one representation or one representative from that group, I would support more the concept of having everyone vote and have a say if they're gonna be involved.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's just the political piece that kind of, with the direction of administrations being able to, you know, go which way or the other. I think if there was more of if the agencies were more non-voting, then I feel like the board would have more of a consistent direction, maybe, instead of going wherever the political winds take us.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Bree.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say as executive director of one of the departments here, I would not want to be a voting member. My job is to serve you and this board. So being able to come in and provide any technical assistance I can at any time. I do understand the time commitment, so even being a member of the board doesn't necessarily feel like I or others have to be on the actual board itself, whether it's member or non-member. My job is to support all your work. And so, you know, how that looks and what you think the board needs is great, but I wouldn't want to be, I don't think it's appropriate for me to be a voting member.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yep, okay, so what I'm hearing is that most people would like voting and non-voting, and that we delineate between agencies and non-agencies. Yes? Okay. Yes.
Madam Chair, I guess I would agree with John, that if you're gonna be serving on the board, you have a background that has been, let's say, developed or has been attractive to the appointing authority, and I think that that should put you into a voting member position. So I think if you're gonna be on it, you should be have a vote.
So what we'll do is we'll put together kind of 2 proposals for next time. And then we can take a more of a vote on that and to determine which one we would like to recommend to the legislature. And then I think, you know, one of the things too is regulatory or non-regulatory. I don't want this to be regulatory. And is that something that we can all agree to as well? Okay, so I think that's a big part about going towards the purpose.
Advisory.
Advisory, yeah, okay. Non-regulatory, okay, so that I think will help us really determine some of the purposes too. And so, do we wanna maybe kind of dive into like some of these big, broad purpose statements right now for maybe just like 15 minutes? And then, Don and I can maybe have some time to dig in and make some proposals again, like we did with this one. Oh, right now? Okay.
Oh, and Jim does.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Well, Madam Chair, I think you may have answered my question, but by saying I don't want it to be I don't want it to be a regulatory board, do you need to formally like put that in the mission statement or put that down somewhere?
I think that would be a very good thing to clarify to
I
us
don't necessarily know where
legislators.
the right place for
And the
it
board.
is, but
Yeah.
if there's that broad of a consensus, I'm assuming there is, but then maybe we need to say that.
Right, and I think,
Somebody
okay,
used the term facilitating board earlier.
yeah, so in this, we have established to evaluate issues, and so maybe we just put the Minnesota Infrastructure Board as a non-regulatory entity established to evaluate issues related to coordination, that kind of stuff. Okay. Evelyn had mentioned that we could take a quick break, do a wordsmith of the kind of purpose statement, and then come back and vote on that. Are you guys all amenable to that? All right,
Right, let's take a 10-minute break.
10-minute break. Use the potty if you need to. Sorry, I have a 4-year-old. She'll be 5 tomorrow.
Okay.
Bumping into walls half the time.
I appreciate appreciate it. I'm gonna run to the.
Yep, okay.
Thank you, thank you.
I'd like to know that
How were you thinking about it?
What's that?
How were you thinking about it?
Well, I think we gotta have ways, like, the transportation, public works, township. Hey, those are the people that are authorities where this really